Leroy Vogt was one of the saints of First Presbyterian Church in Dubuque, Iowa. A lifelong bachelor, Leroy's life really was the church. He played the piano for opening worship at Sunday school every single Sunday, hardly ever reading music, and typically adding his own Leroy-style flourish to whatever he was playing. As a child, I remember thinking they were by far the fanciest hymns I had ever heard. Leroy would scrub the bathrooms at the church if they needed scrubbing. He would fold bulletins if they needed folding. He volunteered every summer to assist with Vacation Bible School and could often be found providing snack time in the kitchen, wearing a chef's hat and apron as he whipped up childhood delicacies like goldfish crackers and grape Kool-Aid. One of my fondest memories of Leroy was when he played Eli in the Bible school play, telling Samuel over and over again, "Go back to bed, Sonny. Can't you let an old man sleep in peace? Stop bothering me." The perpetual ham. Leroy always added his own lines to the play, annoying the narrator very regularly, but bringing it alive in new and exciting ways for the children who looked on. I'm not sure you could have found a hymn that Leroy didn't know. And if you did, chances are he'd find a way to tell you it wasn't a real hymn. The only Sundays he missed church each year were one Sunday to visit his brother in Nebraska, and one Sunday near the 4th of July when he escaped to the nearby Baptist church where they would sing patriotic hymns to his heart's content. As he aged, his hearing began to fail, and he was always too proud to get a hearing aid, which meant when you heard someone yelling, "How are you?" across the fellowship hall, you knew that they were talking to Leroy. Leroy saw First Pres Dubuque through its best years and its worst. Always faithful, always there. Days before I was to return to Dubuque for a baby shower when I was pregnant with Madeline Jane, Leroy died. Because of a family situation, his funeral wasn't going to be held for several months, but the community at First Pres Dubuque was grieving. That Sunday after church, the pastor planned to hold a brief service sharing a few stories about Leroy, offering prayer, singing together his favorite hymn, "Great is Thy Faithfulness," and anyone who wanted to stay was welcome to do so. The benediction for the regular Sunday worship was offered. The pastor reminded everyone they were free to leave, but if they wanted to stay for a few minutes for a brief service honoring Leroy's life, they were welcome to do so. The postlude began, and nobody moved. Not a single person in that whole sanctuary got up and left. I looked around the sanctuary, and my eyes filled with tears, suddenly and profoundly aware that everyone in that church had been touched by the life of Leroy Vogt. Everyone in that church had stories they could share. Everyone in that church had known the compassion and love and faithfulness of God through the life and witness of Leroy. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God. I imagine most of you have known your own version of Leroy over the years. Someone whose love and faithfulness, whose generosity and kindness has touched your life in ways you could never have imagined, and certainly in ways you will never forget. Someone whose deep and abiding love for God and for the church has instilled in you that same love, or at least the desire to seek it out. I imagine some of the people who spring to mind are sitting beside you or across the aisle from you in worship today. I imagine some of them were mentioned by name in our prayer of remembrance this morning. I imagine a multitude more travel with you in your heart as you treasure their memory and their witness and their love. See what love the Father has given, that we should be called children of God. Throughout his writing over and over, the author of 1 John reminds us of our identity. Not an identity found in the world or in our culture or in our nation, but rather an identity rooted in our Creator. The truest, most essential part of our identity as children of God. It is an identity we are never without, an identity we could not dismiss or shake if we wanted to, for God has said yes to us from the beginning of time. God has claimed us as God's own, and we, my friends, are God's beloved, blessed children of God. But as Susan Marie Smith reminds us, our identity as God's children is a gift, but it is also a commitment to live so that others, seeing our love for one another, will recognize the God we worship. To live so that others, seeing our love for one another, will recognize the God we worship. Sounds a bit familiar to me. If you haven't been beaten over the head with it already the past month, I'll remind you again, one of the questions that was asked of Jesus, Jesus, what is the first and greatest commandment? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Keep these words close to your heart. Recite them to your children and your children's children. Talk about them at home and when you are away, when you lie down at night and when you rise in the morning. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house, whatever it takes. To know these words in every fiber of your being, do that. For you are God's children, trusted vessels of God's holy legacy. A legacy that claims you as God's own, and a legacy that you are called to live out each and every day in every facet of your life, living so that others, seeing your love for one another, will recognize the God you worship. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God. There's a reason we remember the Leroys of our lives so dearly. There's a reason we can recall with ease the saints of the church who have had such an impact on our lives. For in a multitude of ways, they have cared for us, they have loved us, they have challenged us and encouraged us. But in their love for us, in their love for the church, in their love for neighbor, they have always pointed beyond themselves toward the one they worship. And because we have known them, because we have borne witness to their love for the world, we have come to know the love of God more deeply. Leroys abound here at Morrisville Presbyterian Church. Friends, in so many ways, as I have gotten to know you all these past 7 months, I have witnessed among you the God you worship. As your lives, your words, your actions have been a witness to God's legacy of love. I've witnessed that love in your care for one another, in your care for the poor and the powerless, in your love for this church, and in your faithfulness to one another in this beloved community. I've asked many of you over lunch or coffee or in your homes what it is that has kept you here at MPC all these years. The answer I've heard over and over and over again is that this is my family, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God. A number of years back, this church celebrated its 150th anniversary. During that celebratory season, a number of you were interviewed about your own history in this church, about your love for this church, your fondest memories in this church, the things you appreciate most about this church, your hopes for this church. I've been listening to these interviews on my drive to work the past few weeks, and they have been a joy to listen to. But one particular comment in those interviews has replayed in my mind again and again and again. The woman being interviewed was asked, "What advice would you have for this church 50 years from now?" She paused for just a moment, and then with the confidence of a child of God, she said, "I have always felt welcomed, at home, accepted, and loved here at this church. And I hope that anybody who comes through our doors, no matter who they are, no matter where they've come from, I hope they feel exactly the same way." See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God. As children of God, we are called to live, ever mindful of the gift of God's love, but ever committed to live so that others, seeing our love for each other and for the world, will recognize the God we worship, so that anyone, whoever they are, wherever they've come from, might walk through the doors of Morrisville Presbyterian Church any day, at any time, and feel welcomed, accepted, at home, and dearly loved. What a beautiful inheritance we have been given as God's children. We have known the love of God in the saints we celebrate today. We have known the love of God in one another and in holy and faithful relationships in this beloved community. And we have known the love of God in the unfathomable sacrifice that Jesus made on our behalf. It is a legacy we have inherited, a legacy we are called to live today, and a legacy we are called to live in every tomorrow that we will ever know. See what love the Father has given, that we should be called children of God. Friends, as we commit ourselves to that legacy for decades to come, we gather around this table to be strengthened for that journey, reminded that there is no greater love we have witnessed in this world than the love offered to us in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. As we gather around Christ's table today, we gather with the communion of saints from every time and every place, from north and south, east and west, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, we gather with the great cloud of witnesses. May our gathering around this table today be a reminder of the abundance of God's love given to each and every one of us, and a reminder of the holy inheritance which is ours to share with the world.